welcome to Middle East Matters, bringing you reports from across the region. Coming up in the programme today, as Yazidi people continue to flee ISIS fighters in the north of Iraq, we look at this ancient community and just why they're fleeing persecution. In Turkey, Recep Tayyip Erdogan was elected president in the first round of voting, a decisive win for the man who's already been at the helm for a decade as prime minister. And how have Israeli Arabs experienced the offensive in Gaza? Hans van Kat returns to an Arab town in Israel where there have been angry clashes between protesters and police. First, Iraq was plunged deeper into political turmoil in a dramatic move. Bypassing Nouri al-Maliki, the Iraqi president named another Shiite politician to take over as prime minister and form a new unity government. Haider al-Abadi was given that task, effectively forcing Maliki out of the job. And the move was welcomed by the US, the UN and senior Iranian officials. But Maliki protested, rejecting Abadi's nomination and saying it went against Iraq's constitution. In the north of Iraq, ISIS jihadists are continuing their offensive, battling in several areas against Kurdish fighters to control towns and villages. The US launched airstrikes against ISIS as part of efforts to rescue several thousand Yazidi people who'd fled from the militants. The Yazidis are an ancient minority in the north of Iraq. Clovis Kasali has more on their plight.
When jihadists captured his town of Sinjar, Shaka Shali had no choice but to run for his life. With his 4 children, he undertook a long and painful journey. 5 days of walking in the mountains to reach this refugee camp.
It was 2 o'clock in the morning when ISIS fighters used heavy artillery. We did try to defend ourselves. We battled for 7 hours, but at the end we didn't have enough ammunition. There was nothing else to do but leave. I saw them with my own eyes grab children and women.
Some 1,500 Yazidis who suffered the same fate have found refuge at the Silopi camp on the Turkish border. Jihadists target this religious minority as they attempt to establish an Islamic state in Iraq and Syria. According to an Iraqi minister, over 500 Yazidis have been killed and some are believed to have been buried alive. Some 300 women appear to have been kidnapped and reduced to slavery. This Swedish doctor is himself a Yazidi. He struggles to find the words to describe the situation of his people, with thousands still stuck on the other side of the border.
Just few kilometers. I think it's a real catastrophe, and it's a real genocide against Yazidi people. I think that the international power and the United Nations must do something.
When the Yazidis fled Sinjar, they travelled through these mountains where shade is scarce. Many had left all of their belongings behind. Islamic State fighters were deployed down the hill to prevent them from crossing, so families found themselves trapped. The lack of water, food and medicine meant that dozens died of dehydration.
My daughter is pregnant and she's stuck there with my 5 sons. My husband and mother-in-law are there too. They can't leave.
The Yazidis have been persecuted for centuries due to their beliefs. Their religion blends elements from Christianity and Islam, ranging from baptism to circumcision. They believe in one God, but some Muslims have accused them of worshipping the devil, as a central figure in their faith is Tawuzi Melek, an angel who serves as an intermediary between man and the divine. Now they are forced to convert or face execution, with ISIS fighters also destroying their holy shrines. In early August, a Yazidi member of parliament made a desperate plea, seeking to alert the rest of Iraq on the tragedy unfolding. There's an estimated 500,000 to 600,000 Yazidis living in Iraq. Since the jihadists overran Sinjar on August the 3rd, more than 200,000 civilians have been forced to flee, according to the United Nations.
As they flee from ISIS, the Yazidi are looking north to Iraqi Kurdistan. With other parts of Iraq in conflict, this semi-autonomous region has been an oasis of stability. Authorities there say the Kurdish Peshmerga fighters have proven their ability to protect the region. And the current climate could make the idea of independence more real than ever. Siobhan Silk explains.
The Kurdish flag worn by the Peshmerga forces, could it soon be the flag of an independent state? Semi-autonomous for the past 2 decades, Iraqi Kurdistan is inching closer to independence. It's long been one of the most stable regions of the country and a haven from violence. Even as ISIS surges across northern Iraq, the Peshmerga are living up to their reputation as a formidable fighting force and keeping the Islamists from the door. The ISIS advance comes as relations between Kurds and Iraq's central government are particularly fragile. At the same time, the region's economy is undergoing an oil-fueled boom, and Kurdistan has recently added to its oil wealth. While the Iraqi forces moved out of fields in the strategic area of Kirkuk, the Peshmerga moved in.
These 3 oil fields have been closed for several months, but now they are under the control of the autonomous government of Kurdistan. They will be very easy to open and export the oil produced. This will also significantly augment oil reserves in Kurdistan.
The US is unhappy with direct oil sales by Kurdistan, concerned it's the precursor to a split. Washington is resolutely against a breakup of Iraq, fearing yet more civil conflict could follow. But Masroor Barzani, the head of the region's security services and son of the Kurdistan governor, believes the international community has to think beyond a unified Iraq at all costs.
Throughout the decades and years ago, it has never been a stable, peaceful country. And there has to be a different look. There has to be a courageous decision by the international community to look at the situation, understand the reality, and address the real problems and not apply theoretical solutions to these problems.
Neighbouring Turkey, with its own Kurdish minority, has long been opposed to a Kurdish state, but Ankara might be softening its stance. Analysts say an independent Kurdistan could be an important buffer between Turkey and jihadists. In the Kurdistan capital Erbil, the feeling is that independence is near.
Today we have a golden opportunity, one of those historic opportunities that happens only very rarely. We feel that this time we are really moving towards independence.
Governor Massoud Barzani wants a referendum on the question as soon as possible. It could bring full independence to a region that's already operating as a sovereign nation in all but name.
Next, it was the first time ever the Turkish people had directly elected their head of state, and Recep Tayyip Erdogan was voted in as president in definitive style. He won an outright majority in the first round, preliminary results giving him just under 52% of the vote. Well, now the political jostling is underway to elect his successor as Prime Minister. Catherine Viet has more.
Recep Tayyip Erdogan!
After 11 years as Prime Minister, Recep Tayyip Erdogan has been elected Turkey's next president.
Today is a new era for Turkey. Today is the day Turkey rises from the ashes to form a new country.
For supporters of his AK party, the result was never in doubt.
It was always obvious who the winner of the election was going to be. The Prime Minister stood tall, and so did the Muslims.
Erdogan garnered nearly 52% of the vote, enough to avoid a second-round runoff. Both his main rivals for the 5-year term have conceded defeat, but they say they'll be keeping an eye on his actions.
I hope these results will be good for our democracy. I congratulate our Prime Minister, and I wish him good luck.
Whoever tramples on our principles, his title doesn't matter. He can be President, Prime Minister or Minister. If he acts against our principles, we won't hesitate to stand against him. He's not going to have immunity just because he's President.
It's the first time Turks have voted for their president. The decision used to be left to members of parliament. Despite a corruption scandal, anti-government protests, and a mining disaster all in the last year, Erdogan still enjoys strong support from many, particularly religious conservatives. In recent decades, presidents have largely played a ceremonial role. Erdogan says he'll exercise full presidential powers, including chairing cabinet meetings and appointing key posts in the justice system.
Now, before Israel launched its offensive in Gaza, tensions were already running high with protests in Arab towns across Israel. France 24 returned to a town in the centre of the country a month after violent clashes broke out there to gauge the mood now after a month of conflict in Gaza. Chris Moore reports.
July the 5th and clashes break out in Calais, the anger spilling over following the murder of a Palestinian teenager in East Jerusalem. Among the protesters that day was Hassan. He says the situation degenerated when police took exception to their pro-Palestine slogans.
They came towards us, they started to hit us, and they threw tear gas at us.
As in much of Israel, sirens have been sounding here, warning of rockets fired from Gaza. For Hassan's brother, that's a source not of fear, but of pride.
I was happy. I want them to hit their targets.
Israeli, Arab, a conflict of identity which becomes more acute in times of crisis.
I've been asking myself who I am for the last 30 years. I know I'm on Palestinian land, but I have Israeli citizenship.
Israeli by citizenship, but like most of the Arabs who make up 20% of the country's population, Hassan defines himself as Palestinian by nationality. For this local lawyer and activist, there's no difference between the descendants of those who were expelled or fled during the 1948 Arab-Israeli War and those who remained.
You can't separate us from the Palestinians. We're one people, whether we're in Gaza or on Israeli soil. And Israel just doesn't understand why its Arabs are up in arms about what's happening in Gaza.
For Calais' mayor, the recent spike in tensions has proved a juggling act. As an official within the state of Israel, he's had to balance the emotion out on the streets with the need to maintain order.
Freedom of speech is everybody's right. Nobody can stop people from expressing their feelings. I have strong views about this myself, but I'm the mayor, and I don't want to see violence undermining our cause.
Israel's Arab population has long complained of being treated as second-class citizens. They bemoan rising racism. The government line remains that they have the same rights as any other members of a democracy.
Well, that brings us to the end of this week's Middle East Matters. See you again next time, and meanwhile, do stay tuned to France 24.